Hello and welcome to another edition of Gin with Gwyn. I'm Oliver Gwyn, and this is where we talk about marketing, data, and philosophy. This week, I'm talking about restaurants and how would I open one, and what techniques or business strategy would I employ. Why? Because I thought it would be interesting to talk about. So you might be familiar with the statistic that 90% of restaurants will fail in the first year, which is scary stuff. And I wanted to have a look into this. I don't like to come to this blog and just accept the first fact I find on LinkedIn. And the stats that I found were a little bit better, but not a lot better. So, um, 3 out of 5 restaurants won't survive 1 year, and then 4 out of 5 will fail within 5 years, which means that there's a 20% success rate of new restaurants. Scary stuff. So, why is this? Why do so many restaurants fail? Well, the number one reason, something that doesn't really make a lot of sense, is that it takes on average 5 years to pay back the equipment for your kitchen, for your restaurant, all that kind of stuff. It takes 5 years to pay back all your cookers and all that kind of stuff. But the banks and money lenders will only give you a 3 year loan, which means that all of your profit is going straight into paying back that loan. It means that you have then less opportunities to fail and then fix things. You have less capital to invest in other parts of your business, like marketing. And it's just generally not a good situation for anybody. But of course, the money lenders, they know that restaurants are likely to fail. And so they want to make sure that they get as much of their investment back as quickly as possible, which is the reason that they do that. Other reasons that restaurants fail, I'm sure we've all seen Gordon Ramsay's House Kitchens or similar programs to that. But there's a lot of mistakes that people make because they're no restaurants. So they have too many things on the menu because they want to go wide and then shorten it down over time. But again, because you have this overhead or this loan that you have to pay off, you have a lot less time to experiment and get things successful. Another reason is that apparently 55% of diners will decide where to eat based on location. And so restaurant owners will go for areas that have higher footfall, higher passing traffic, thinking that that gives them more opportunities to get people in the doors. But of course, the places with higher footfall will also have a higher rent, which means there's more of a chance of failure of something that's new. And the only thing that they've got to go on to decide these locations is sort of demographic data, census data, which is normally a few years out of date and might not be so relevant. I always remember Barbarito, the owners of that, saying that whenever they picked a new location, what they would do is they would literally stand outside of the proposed location with a clicker. And every time somebody walked past that they thought would afford them or would be a customer of Barbarito, they clicked it and then they based their decisions on that. So having that empirical first-hand data rather than the census data, which I think is kind of interesting and good. Other problems, obviously, at the moment, food prices are going crazy. The cost of everything is shooting up, and restaurants can't really employ dynamic pricing. So they can't just give that cost and give it straight to the customer. Why? Because people don't like that. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's not really fair, Oliver. If the costs are going up, I as a restaurant can't just give away money. No, of course you can't. But also, if you're known for selling something for £4 and suddenly it's £6 the next day, that's a huge price increase for your customers. It potentially puts you in a different category where you were a cheap option before and suddenly you're sort of a mid-tier option, and maybe you don't have the background and the legacy and the aesthetics to back that up. And so it's very difficult. Restaurants can't just simply up their prices in line with food. They have to decide what the strategy is around that, what items bring people in regularly and have a nice profit margin on them already, and what items they can then increase in cost because there may be a more of a one-off item where there's less chance of people fussing about the price. Let's have a look at some more problems. So 8% of bookings result in a no-show. I thought that was going to be a lot higher, but that's still obviously a problem. But perhaps the most interesting thing is that a lot of the traditional ways that restaurants make money is changing because of the demographics out there. So obviously, in a lot of restaurants, wine is a really great profit maker, and one of the reasons that a lot of restaurants, when you go in there, they have wine glasses already on the table. They don't have a drinks list. They have a wine list, all to get you to buy wine because people are less knowledgeable about wine, generally speaking. And so you can have a really big markup on a bottle of wine. But today, 1 in 5 young adults under 25 are teetotal. And this is a generation that is less likely to drink alcohol than any other generation that has gone before it. And so that profit margin is under a lot of threat from your new customers and from your future customers. And that's not a trend that's likely to change. Teetotal, 1 in 5, is massive. So you can imagine that maybe 3 out of 5 of that generation are just not heavy drinkers, or maybe they're not going to drink when they're at the restaurant. And so you have to find different ways and different reasons to add prices to your thing. So that was a little bit negative, right? There's lots of problems. But the good news is I think there's actually a very bright future and there's a very clear path for restaurants going forward. So digitization has been really, really interesting for the restaurant industry versus sort of retail. So in everybody for hundreds of years, we only had physical locations, right? If you're a shop, you had a shop. That's how you interacted with people face to face. And then the internet got invented. People had, for many, many years, and maybe only for the first 10 years of the internet, they had maybe an online shop and it didn't do very well. And almost certainly it wasn't profitable. People weren't really using on that. They didn't trust the internet to give over their personal information for. That seems crazy today, but it was very, very true for a long time. And so what happened in the world of retail is that all of the brands that were low profit, high volume type of brands, typically they were better off being online only. And so you saw a lot of smaller brands pop up that were online only, e-retail, direct to consumer in some places. And similarly in the restaurant industry, you have takeout suddenly have probably got a much higher volume of customers than they ever had before because they had lower rents, they had higher profits, all driven by a third-party aggregator, which is the same as in e-retail. One interesting thing about digitization that I don't feel like people talk about at all is potentially I think it's bad for industry in a way, because in a world where the only shops that you go to are luxury brands, or they're brands with a higher profit margin because they can afford those retail spaces as physical spaces, and all the other shopping is done online, well, then you're not going to get a natural progression to those shops, right? Because if you're a teenager today, right, you can't afford to shop at Gucci probably unless your parents are rich. You can afford to shop at a Primark or a H&M or something that's more affordable to you. And then over time, you will spend more money in theory as your earnings go up, and you will be able to then sort of progress up until these retail chains that have got physical spaces. But if you don't have an entry point into that, maybe clothes are a slightly bad example because people still want to try them on. But if you don't have a relationship that is, shopping can be a leisure activity. Shopping is not just buying something that I need. Essentially, it has sort of a fun element with it, a social element if I'm shopping with my friends. If you've not had that experience because you just simply can't afford it, there's a barrier there, then quite likely, I don't think you're going to go from online only to, oh, I'm going to spend hundreds of pounds on a physical shop, because that doesn't happen. There's no progression for you to go upwards in that way. And so I think there's a problem there where if rents stay high and the only shops that can afford them and the only restaurants that can afford them are fancy restaurants and high-end retail, then essentially they're going to destroy the whole industry, because you won't have a progression of customers in the long term. And slowly over time, and it's probably, there's already signs of this in the data today, that less people will find your brand because of that. There's also an argument, of course, because only the high-end brands can afford these things, that they will have all of the market in the future for physical when it comes to that. But I'm not sure that I see that happening. So digitization, essentially, takeouts could make a lot more money and they had lower overheads. And so that became a lot better avenue. I always thought food trucks were where the money was at. And instead of opening a restaurant, which is very risky, maybe your demographic changes around you over 5-10 years, a food truck, if it's not good, you get a license and you move somewhere else. No worries. You need 2 people, maybe 3 people to operate a food truck. So you're not having to worry about staff, which is a huge problem in the restaurant industry. So I always thought, yeah, food trucks, that's what I'd do if I was a restaurateur. I wouldn't go for a physical restaurant. And today, I'm not sure I'd even go for a food truck. I think I would actually go for kitchen-only businesses. So kitchen-only businesses, They're just a commercial kitchen, and then they work with an aggregator. And by aggregator, I mean like a delivery service like Deliveroo or Just Eat. Um, but they don't have a restaurant. They don't have a shop front at all. They're delivering direct to customers. And there's a lot of places that are facilitating these kind of businesses, like Kitchen Karma in London, so that smaller size restaurants can start in a way that is lower overheads. They can just rent the commercial kitchens out from them. They only need a few staff to actually do the cooking. And of course, through aggregators, they can find customers much more easily. Now, that has a downside to it, of course. If your business is always through aggregators, then they have a percentage of your profit, which they can change at any point. You don't have any control over that. And they can also favor people. So if you're on Amazon and you're a retail business and Amazon decides that they like a particular brand that they've got a partnership with, and you're in that same category, they're going to favor them over you potentially. If you only have a relationship with your end customer through aggregators, then your end point or your point of contact is a third party. So someone who doesn't have a stake in your business, they're a delivery driver who is basically freelance. And if that delivery driver spills your milkshake or messes up in some sort of way, then that person has a very bad experience with your brand, and it's quite likely that they're not going to come back. And of course, the main problem is that if you have a physical restaurant on a street, you've got maybe 3 or 4 points of competition. If you are a kitchen only brand, you are side by side with thousands of other brands, and obviously some of them have got a reputation because they've been in business for 10s and 20 years. They've got that physical location as well, so they've got a clear sort of advantage there. So I would still definitely go down this kitchen only route if I was starting a restaurant. But a few things I would do differently. So the first is that I think that branding is really, really important. Don't just send a generic box or some Tupperware there with just a sticker on it. Try and go the extra mile when it comes to branding. It will cost pence more, which you can charge the customer for. But I think it makes a real difference in standing out against all the other takeout people that you're in competition with. I would also make sure that I have coupons, information about the business, who is involved in that. Try and have some sort of relationship there. Could you put a little leaflet in there that says, like, hey, we're Oliver's restaurant. Did you know that Oliver was trained in France and did 3 years of culinary work? This is a lie, by the way. I'm a terrible chef. But you can build up a sort of story around your business there, as well as giving a coupon, because loyalty is sort of everything in the restaurant business. A really interesting video I saw recently, and I'll put a link below, is that the first time a customer comes to your restaurant, if everything goes perfectly, you've only got a 40% chance that they come back. And it's only on the fourth visit that it suddenly goes up quite a lot. It goes up to 70%. And then from the fourth visit, you get a lot of customer loyalty, you get a lot of lifetime value on that. And so physical restaurants, they really want you to come back 4 times. And so it makes a lot of sense for them to give you a free pudding, to give you a discount for your second visit, all this kind of stuff. And the same will be true, I would imagine, of any sort of kitchen only businesses. So getting people coming back time after time is really, really important for you. And any way that you can do that without eating into your profit too much is important. Now, there is a problem with an aggregator business, so relying on a third party, which is that I don't know off the top of my head. I tried to have a quick look into this, how much details you get. I would imagine if you're the restaurant, it's quite possible that you don't get the address of that person. But some people have said that you do get the address, you get the first name of somebody, but you don't get the last name. And maybe you get a mobile order for emergencies only, but some people say that actually you have to call for a third party. So it depends on what data you get, but quite likely you're serving a specific area because you're kitchen only. You can only do maybe 10 miles or something. And so it's really important, if you don't have the data on where people are living, if you don't have a contact point for them, that you try and get that. And the reason is, if you want to then start a physical location, if that's your dream, maybe if you think that there's more profit in that in the long term, then you can start a wait list essentially. So I would start, as well as giving people more information about the business and the background and all of this kind of stuff and suggesting things that they might like. I would also start saying, hey, next year we're thinking about opening a restaurant. Here's my concept art for the restaurant. It's going to be in this location. If we open this, would you come? here's a barcode. Just type as yes or no. You'll get 10% off your next order. That's a great way of finding out how many people are likely to come. Now, maybe you'll get a slightly higher percentage because they want that discount or they want something else. Um, but the wait list is a great way of anticipating how many people in the area are already happy with your business. Uh, is there enough of a hint there that it would work in that particular location? And then you can follow up. Maybe you get a survey that's attached to that that says, okay, this location doesn't have parking. Is parking important to you? This location, we can only get normal internet. Is that important to you? And you can find the aspects that people really care about above and beyond food, um, that make a difference to your restaurant so that you can then hit that 4 visits, and you can get loyal customers over the long term. A lot of the aggregated businesses I've heard don't like sharing the data. So wherever you can get people onto your system, it's always a good thing to do. Because if you've got that data, then you can try and optimize it as much as possible. And when you're looking at locations and things, you're not just relying on statistics from National Geographic data or census data or anything like this. You can ask your existing customers if they want to do that. So if I was a restaurant, I would start a kitchen only business. I would spend more time, money, and effort on website, which seems unnecessary to a lot of people, but I think a website is important. But my focus on the restaurant website would not be to get orders. Not I'm not so worried about getting direct orders from there. I'm not so worried about, do I need to integrate Shopify and create a menu on there? I would actually just put a menu on there. Maybe I would put a phone number only on there, but I'm not basically setting up this website to get direct orders. I don't care about that. It's more about the story of the restaurant. What kind of foods do we do? What recommendations do we have? It's more of a social media type of presence than it is to get orders. So my goals for that website are slightly different. I would have a lot more branding and I would include a lot more information about the background of my restaurant and the staff there and try and create a bit more personalization so that I stand out from people from the aggregators. And then I would use that business, my kitchen only business, to then figure out my next steps, which are, hey, if I did a food truck, would that be successful? If I open a physical restaurant, is that going to be successful? And that would be my path there. And it might be a 5 or 10 year path to the point where the profit margin on the physical restaurant makes common sense for me, because obviously the numbers are going to be quite different. The business is quite different. And what you have to optimize is different. Where if you're kitchen only, you're worried about your food mostly, and you're worried about repeat customers. In a physical restaurant, there's the ambiance, there's the staff, there's all these different things. But that would be my route to a successful restaurant. If you run a restaurant and you want me to come and look and destroy your restaurant with a crazy review, is that something I do? No, but I'm willing to do it if you give me some free food. So if you're watching and you run a restaurant, get in touch with me and I'll come along and eat some stuff and look at your menu and all that kind of things. Maybe it'll be useful for you too. I don't know. Thanks very much for watching. Give me some free food. I've been Oliver Gwyn, and this has been Gin with Gwyn.